Hi, Caroline.
Hello, Lisa.
Thank you so much for coming along and chatting with me today. I started insolvency 22 years ago, and back then, directors weren't, for whatever reason, all their claims were rejected from the redundancy payments office. And then at some point, I guess there was some kind of change in policy or the rules, and they were suddenly then allowed to claim. And then since then, only the last couple of years, I think, we've now started to have these new rejections. So perhaps you can explain a little bit about your background and then the recent changes and how that's affected director employee claims.
So I came into this field 14 years ago now. And at that time, it was difficult for directors to be paid. You're quite right. It was felt that directors in their role in the company had a hand in their own fate, if you like,
Yes.
I guess, and that they weren't deserving. And then you're quite right, actually. It became easier, and there were a few challenges in tribunal which were won by directors, and suddenly that meant that a lot more people were paid for many years. Yes, for about 10 years. I mean, it still wasn't easy. You still had to go through quite an arduous process, but it was much more likely that you would be successful. And then 2 years ago, I have no idea whether COVID had anything to do with it.
I suspect it did. I mean, don't want to get political here, but my gut is that they've got to try to claw back all of these billions of pounds of losses from somewhere. And to my mind, it's a bit of an easy target.
I agree with you. And furthermore, there was a force in the market that meant that the change in IR35 also meant a lot of people were claiming as well. And I think there were quite a lot of spurious claims. And then I think someone said, okay, enough. What's the best way of stopping this and reducing the bill? So they toughened up massively. And the problem now is that they are very inclined to turn directors down. And just say, well, you don't qualify under this law, the Employment Act 1996. If you don't like it, go to tribunal. Now, the tribunal process is very complicated. You have to be very determined to go through the process.
Yes.
And there'll be a long process for one thing, because there's a lot of rules and regulations about timings and disclosures and all sorts of things. And to most directors, it's not enough for them to say, it's worth doing.
Yeah.
So you get the situation where people think, oh, well, I wasn't really expecting anything. Didn't feel like a right I knew about. It's nothing I'd ever banked upon.
Yeah, because some of them don't actually know, first of all, that scheme is there. Some of them phone me up and obviously they want insolvency advice and they've been delaying that for various reasons. But one of those reasons can often be they don't want to make the employees redundant. Obviously, they've got those relationships there, and morally, they feel obliged to keep them in employment as long as possible. So when they find out actually there is a government scheme in place, which means the employees can claim most, if not all, of the monies that is owed to them for their wage arrears, notice pay, pension contributions, redundancy, and holiday pay, that is a massive weight off the director's shoulders. So exactly right. They don't always know that. And why would they? They haven't been through the process before. But then to find out that they, in the past, could also make a claim as employees, subject to ticking those boxes, which we're going to chat about. It can come as a surprise. So as you say, sometimes they think, well, I didn't know I was going to entitle to anything anyway, and now it's far too complicated. So I haven't lost anything, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually, that's really unfair for people who actually could qualify. It seems unnecessarily complicated, and very much the cards are definitely stacked against the director. And there's no doubt about it. There are further stages in the process. They make it easy for employees, relatively easy for employees. It's pretty straightforward, to be honest, but it is much more complicated, and they'll get you if they can.
And so are you able to chat a little bit about the hurdles now? I mean, perhaps what they used to have to prove themselves as an employee.
All employees are employees, all directors are directors, but which employees are also directors? What have you got to show to determine whether that you are indeed an employee? And it's only employees that are entitled to this engagement in this fund, first and foremost, the National Insurance Fund, that do you actually go to work and do a job in the company fundamentally? Are you on the payroll? Do you pay PAYE? People think that's normally enough to show you're an employee, but it's not. Are you paid regularly? Like, are you actually paid regularly, not just on the payroll? Are you paid just up to the tax threshold and paid then a monthly dividend top up if you can, if the cash flow's there? The small things like, do you keep holiday records? Do you have an overdrawn loan account? Who do you report to? If you've got a grievance, who do you go to? Now, the funny thing is that a lot of directors don't feel like employees, they feel like the boss, and therefore they approach the process as they've always viewed themselves in their own company as the one that, but the buck stops with, the one that does everything, the one that is, is in charge, he does everything.
And if you're a sole director, that makes sense.
If you're a sole director, it's more difficult. Yeah, it is definitely more difficult again. But even for a couple of directors, 2 or 3 directors, your mindset isn't that of an employee, and that comes across in the way you approach the process. It should be that all the answers lie in the legislation, the Employment Rights Act of 1996. But on top of that, you've then got policy. There was a time when it was very random who would get paid and who wouldn't get paid.
Right.
There's a bit more consistency at the moment, but not in a good way, I have to say.
No, consistent rejections.
It's more rejections. Not complete, not everyone is rejected, but there have been times when it's been very inconsistent, which is completely unfair as well.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more consistent at the moment because I think they're on this drive to keep the payments low.
And when you and I spoke about this previously, there was not just the issue of, are you an employee and can you tick these boxes and prove all these things, the employee contract and the way it payroll, etc. But there was also that issue, or the element more of the control, which you kind of touched upon or hinted at a moment ago, but perhaps you can just expand on that a little bit.
Okay, so if you were to look at the Employment Rights Act, there are features, if you like, features in your working life that point towards you being an employee.
Yeah.
And I like to think of it like a weighing scale. So you're going to have some things which are on the negative side and some on the positive side. When we're helping people, our job is to kind of make sure the weight's in the right direction. Some things are terminal, like owing the company money, having an overdrawn loan account, but there are ways of dealing with that. But if you just go into it with an overdrawn loan account, that's the end of the story. So you've got all these features in the law. If you look at cases that have been taken to the tribunal, you'll find that some come out as being held as more significant than others.
Yeah.
And one that's been significant recently has been whether you are subject to an element of control. And if you're a sole director, it used to be that your external advisors could be deemed to be an acceptable form of control if you went to your accountant if your accountant came in every month, or your professional body if you're an architect or something like that.
Yes.
They're a bit stiffer on that now if they want to be.
It's a very easy way to just say, right, well, we can instantly eliminate all sole director claims. If you want to fight it,
if you've got time to fight it, be our guest.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think you also mentioned that you had a case recently where it was actually 2 directors and you still had that similar issue or that same issue.
Yes. And in fact, worse, there were actually 3 directors, but one was non-executive. And that has been turned down because he wasn't a shareholder. They didn't think that was sufficient.
Right.
He didn't. And I would like to have taken that case further to appeal. But unfortunately, the directors concerned run out of gas with it.
Yes.
They're busy people in new jobs, and it takes a lot of time and effort. So while I still think that's challengeable. I think the weight was placed on the wrong factor in that case. It's difficult because you know, if they're not up for it, then it's not going to
Yes.
go further.
And so I think it might be useful for you to explain to our viewers how UKELC works, how you come to get your paid, and how that can work, be beneficial for the directors.
We help directors, and in fact, by helping directors, we often get involved with helping the staff along as well here and there, but that's just a
A bonus, an added
bonus, let's say.
Yeah.
Yes. So our aim is to be appointed by the directors to take charge of their claims, and that means that we need to be provided with the information and provided with the proof, the documentary evidence like payroll information and contracts if there is one, and so on. I mean, not having a contract isn't terminal, which is why it wasn't on my list actually, but it's helpful if you have got a contract. We then are responsible for all the online submissions and the subsequent follow-up layers of inquiry. There's the secondary direct questionnaire, which is problematic. They ask the same questions they've already asked you in a different way, and then if you start answering in a different way, they'll be down on you because they, you know, it's easy to make mistakes. But anyway, so we take charge of all that. When eventually a decision is made, even if it's successful, it's often wrong. So you have to go back and challenge elements. There might be an element missing, or they might have not agreed with something. Sometimes there's a discrepancy between what the claimant has claimed and what the IP has suggested.
Yes.
Facts. And actually we try and make sure that doesn't happen by communicating about that in the first place, so everyone's on
before you get to that stage.
Yeah, because it all slows everything down, you know. So if it gets sent back for a look, you know, to be looked at again because this is wrong or we say that's wrong, then obviously that gets caught up, really.
Yeah,
it just slows everything down. And then of course they don't really have a proper inquiry office anymore. They have what passes for one, but not one like there used to be post-COVID. And then when it comes through and, you know, and it's all been checked properly and everything and so on, then you can be satisfied that you've got everything that you were due. And if you haven't been awarded something, we can explain why. When people are turned down, we do go back and dispute it, even when they say that, you know, you could just go to tribunal. They're often adamant, but sometimes they've mistaken something. But it is quite hard to get decisions overturned. So
remind me what your rates are. You've got two different bases?
Yes. So because of the way things are at the moment, our fee, if we're involved with you from the outset, is 20% plus VAT of the outcome, only the outcome. If there's no outcome and you are rejected, you're sadly rejected, then there's no charge at all. If you come when you've already been rejected, if we accept your case, then I'm afraid at that point the fee would be 25%, because there's always a much lower chance of success once a rejection's already been issued. We're very honest with people always. If we think you've got no chance, we will tell you. And we will also tell you if we think there is some chance, but there are some dangers. You know,
that's why I always think, because I point directors in your to you to come and take advice from you initially, because you'll have a chat with them and you'll say whether or not, you know, you'll think it's just a no-brainer. I know I always say that, but it is a no-brainer. Why would you head into something that's now got so complicated? You would just pay an expert, and it's a no-win, no fee. So, you know, I would much rather pay commission and get you to do all of that legwork and hold the hand and do the application and deal with the insolvency services and everything that comes with that, then try to do it myself to save that 20 or 25% or whatever your current rates are at the time, and then potentially make a hash of it and get nothing. You know,
I know. Well, we do keep our rates under review. I think honesty is the best policy. And the other thing is, when you're coming out of an insolvency situation, a lot of people it's very normal to feel tired, exhausted often, and really distressed. You know, it's often a very painful time.
It's a little bit like grieving, I think. Sometimes, you know, they've gone through all this trauma, and they've had enough going on with the liquidation. and the redundancy and the
You just
staff, and,
haven't got to
you know,
worry about it.
losing their baby.
Yeah.
And then this is an extra hurdle and a headache on top of that, which is another reason why I think just pay you guys to help them sort it out.
It's one thing off the list to be having to worry about.
Yeah.
And actually it's really rather lovely because I do think that people feel that when they're involved in doing this with us, and sort of entrusting us with it, I think they feel like someone's really on their side.
Yes.
That's another reason why the fee structure, you know, only being paid on success is kind of psychologically good, because if they know we're incentivized to do our very best. And actually it's one of those things sometimes that feels like, you know, if it comes off okay, it feels like one of those, like this is a new page, you know, something good's happened now. It's a very fulfilling, actually, dealing with these directors and helping them at a difficult time.
You mentioned the tribunals where it doesn't work out and they're told if you don't like it, tough, you're going to have to take it to a tribunal. What's your involvement there, or is that where you have to take a step back?
We aren't barristers, and we aren't qualified employment lawyers, although we're very expert in this particular area of employment law. We're paralegals, if you like, but very, very specialised.
Yes.
We have assisted a number of clients at tribunal, and the reason has been because we wanted to try and prove a point so that it would apply to other of our clients. Now, that has been successful in one notable case, but unfortunately, these decisions aren't binding. The points, I mean, there were a number of points that were upheld in that particular case, including the fact that you could be paid a lower sum. They're not binding unless it's gone through the Court of Appeal.
Right.
Perversely, the RPS won't appeal anything like that because they don't want to lose an appeal and then find that it's binding.
Yes. Right. So it's good news, it's a win for the client in that particular tribunal, but not for the global sort of clients. Is there a particular theme that you're seeing with the rejections currently in, you know, the changes since the COVID, which I think to my mind seem to be that issue where they're taking the minimum wage, they're topping the rest up with dividends, they're doing all of that for tax purposes, and then that comes back to bite them because when it comes to the insolvency, they're finding that that works against them.
Yes, I think the worst one is not actually paying yourself what your payslip says.
Right. Yes.
So the payroll is just like a sleight of hand, you know, it's just something that whirs in the background and actually
just
doesn't
press a button once a month, but I'm going to keep taking £3 grand out every ad or for whatever ad hoc, whatever the company can afford. I'm going to take out this bulk sum.
And actually, even if you did it separately, it's better.
Yes.
So that isn't to say that your weighing scale is going to be right, but it's if you took out your £841 or something, and then your £2,000 top up, and you actually took that out of the bank account, because they look at your bank account for the last 12 months. So I look at everyone's bank account at an early stage, and when I see that there's really random amounts coming in and out, never matching the payroll,
just sporadic.
It's disaster, really.
And funny enough, it raises red flags with me as well, but that's for different reasons, because I know that potentially we're going to have an issue with unlawful dividends or overdrawn directors' loan accounts or illegal preferences when I see those lump sums coming out. So that is, we have similar flags that get raised, but for different reasons between them.
Yes, but they're red flags nevertheless, absolutely. I mean, what I'm trying to do is get the message out to accountants of small businesses: just pay yourself a national minimum wage for 35 hours. You know, the benefit of actually paying yourself a low up to the tax threshold and the dividend is much less now than it used to be in any event.
It'd be interesting to know if there has started to be a bit of a change. Like we said before, if it works, if it gives them all those tax benefits, they're not suddenly going to think, well, I'm going to change this now in case my company goes insolvent, because I'm going to want to
Well, this is the thing that,
pay the
yes,
funds. Yeah.
and what they are saying, you know, what the RPS is saying over everything is, look, you've had the benefit. You've had the benefit of lower taxes, so you're not, you know, that's why you're
Yeah.
not entitled.
You
And
can't have it, but you can't have it
that
both
benefit.
ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just the terminology is opaque, really, and therefore it can feel unfair even when people weren't expecting it.
Is there anything else you think perhaps I haven't asked you about, you want to touch upon for our viewers?
Don't assume you'll be turned down. Make inquiries. If you can find out whether you're going to qualify or not, fine.
Just need to speak to you, don't they?
I guess, yeah.
You know, have a chat to you. You're friendly, you're approachable, you're honest. You'll give them an idea of whether or not you think they've got, you know, based just on your initial chat, you'll be able to know
Yeah.
if there's definitely red flags there. You'll say this may be an issue, but we can look at it, or
Yeah.
this is going to be, you know, this sounds like it's positive, and we'll have a look at it, or completely no way, you've got no hope. don't even bother, you know.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Maybe one of these tribunals will go to the Court of Appeal and it might change things, but for now you think this is here to stay then for the near
For the time
future?
being, but then we couldn't have anticipated any of the prior changes, you know.
No.
So I think it's a bit of yes, I mean, for the time being we are where we are, but we have no clue as to when it might change again. And actually, I do promise you that if it happens before I retire, then I will let you know so you can update this video.
All right. Well, lovely, Caroline. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope your viewers find this helpful.